Hi, I'm Leslie Whitty. I'm the Vice President of Outreach and Communications for the South Central Workforce Development Board. Joining me is John Sallards. He is the Vice President of Operations and Special Projects for the board. And welcome to our deep dive into the Open Jobs Report analysis and review. If you watch the introduction, we left off with our agenda. So that is going to be where we start off for this thorough look into the different sectors and the data that has been compiled. And John, all of this is for August of 2020, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So the first thing we have is the executive overview, and John's going to be going through the majority of this information. If I have any questions that I think people might have at the end of each sector, I'll be asking those, and I may be asking for myself as well. Just being upfront with you. All right, so to begin, the executive overview.
All right. Well, so brace yourself. What you're about to see are a series of slides that have lots of numbers, and lots of detail, lots of words. And so if you're watching this from, whether it's a laptop or your phone, you may not be able to see everything. So I'll call out, the different numbers as we go along and provide context. But rest assured, what will go out in conjunction with this presentation, we'll send out a hard copy of this presentation, and we'll have it available on our website, and we'll publish it through our social media and other platforms. So rest assured, if this interests you and you want to get into this and spend more time with it, you'll have access to a hard copy. So we'll start with an executive overview, and I'm going to go through this in some detail and spend a little bit of time on this, and then we'll get into 6 subsequent industry clusters in detail. So, first of all, kind of starting on the top left, when we did this analysis, we focused solely on the 10 counties that make up South Central Kentucky and kind of our area of responsibility. Anything outside of that, we tried to strip that out, or if we can't strip it out, we make note of it. When we look at our 10 counties, what we have total in terms of total number of jobs in our region is 130,500 jobs. That is filled and unfilled jobs. I made reference to the 6 industry clusters. That's kind of top middle. So what we're going to focus in on this report are the following 6 industry clusters. Retail, hospitality, and food, which makes up over 28,000 jobs in our region. Manufacturing, which makes up over 26,000 jobs in our region. Healthcare and social assistance, followed by professional services, construction, and then we'll conclude with transportation, distribution, and logistics. Off to the right of that center box is a pie chart, and all that's depicting is what percentage of total region employment each one of these clusters makes up. So, for example, when you look at retail, hospitality, and food, there in green, that makes up 21.9% of the total number of jobs that we have in our 10-county region. Moving to the bottom left corner of the slide, and we made mention of this in the first segment, when we looked at a 30-day snapshot of jobs advertised, the period between August 2nd and August 31st, we found that there were 7,442 jobs advertised in that 30-day period. In the tan boxes, and this is what we really spoke to in the first segment, when we look at that 7,400 plus jobs, what we found is that 58% of those jobs had an average wage at or below $15 an hour. And 27% of that 7,442 jobs were part-time, and that approximately 15% were over 1,100 of the jobs actually were jobs being advertised from outside of our region. So we've covered that in some fairly good detail in the first segment. Looking at the next, kind of moving to the right, looking at education requirements. So what we found when you look at all 7,400 jobs, what we found is that 26% of the jobs advertised basically requested a high school degree or equivalent. 3% indicated a need for associate's degree, 5% for a bachelor's degree, 3% for a master's. And that, if that seems low to you, it is, because 63% of all the jobs advertised did not identify an education requirement at all, which is kind of a surprising number. Not sure exactly why that is. It may be that employers are not listing it in order to cast a wider net. That's one theory. I will say, from a workforce and economic development perspective, this makes our job a little bit difficult, because we kind of sit in between what employers need for their workforce, what skills are needed, and with our education partners. And so, if there's a skill that's not being produced, or an education requirement that's not being indicated, it makes it harder for our education partners to develop that pipeline to feed the needs of our workforce. And so this is definitely a conversation that we need to convene between employers and education partners, so that we can maybe get a better handle on what education credentials are needed in our local workforce. All right, so continuing to move to the right. What we did, this is just a data point. When you look at all occupations and all wage ranges, when you take it all into account, what we find is that the median wage for workers in our area is $33,600, which equates to $16.60 an hour. That is the median wage that we have. Continuing to move to the right, unemployment rates. What the latest data that we had access to were June 2020 unemployment rates. And so what you see on this slide is we compare locally, we compare June 2019 to June 2020 unemployment rate. So in June 2019, our region was enjoying a 4.3% unemployment rate, which was very low. And then the most recent snapshot of June 2020, it's 10.2%. Below that, you can kind of, is a point of comparison, you can see what it looks like in the U.S. So the U.S. in June of 2019 had a slightly lower unemployment rate than we did, but now, as of June 2020, they have a slightly higher unemployment rate. So, we are, although unemployment is very high, we are doing a little better than the national average today. Just a couple of key takeaways. When you kind of look at all of this together, despite COVID, there remains a significant number of job openings in our region. As mentioned, our unemployment rate is high, but we are doing a little bit better than the U.S. average. And I don't get into it on this slide, but you'll see it on subsequent slides. We looked at 3 years of wage rate data, and what we found is that pretty much, with the exception of the healthcare and social assistance sector, our local wages over the last 3 years have increased really kind of in lockstep with what we're seeing with the state and the U.S. Wage increases. But that said, our local wages do continue to lag state and national averages, and you'll see that in subsequent slides. So that's the executive summary. I'll ask Leslie if she has any questions that I can answer or clarify.
I just have one. You mentioned the 15, there was a percentage, and this number of jobs, the salary is $15 or below.
Yes.
Why would that be significant to know? What does that tell us about
the analysis here is, so 58% of all the jobs listed, when you look at them and you put them all together, and then you say, okay, what's the average wage rate for all these jobs? Well, 58% of them, over 4,300 of these jobs, have an average wage rate at $15 an hour or below. So, I think that's what it's telling us, is we have lots of entry-level jobs, or kind of maybe jobs on the lower skill spectrum. And that's not surprising. If you think of things in a pyramid, obviously you always have you generally have a lot more folks at the lower level of the pyramid. And as you go up the pyramid in terms of skills and experience and credentials, that pyramid, that grouping gets smaller. But, what we're going to do, I appreciate you asking that question, because one of our final slides is a living wage calculator that we're just going to provide to everybody as a point of comparison. And so, so we'll look at that kind of towards the end, but there's also another point of comparison on this slide. I mean, if the median wage rate that I indicated was $16.60 an hour, that's kind of the median wage rate in our region. You can kind of compare that to, well, what does it mean when 58% of your jobs are below $15 an hour? So,
right. Okay, very good. So the next sector or actually the first sector, this was more of an overview. The first sector that you're going to be going through in detail is retail, hospitality, and food service. That cluster. Okay.
So what I'll do, thank you, Leslie. What I'll do is spend a little bit more time on this because we're going to follow the same kind of format on the other slides. So I'll spend a little bit more time on this one to get everybody oriented to how to read this, and then we'll kind of zip through the other ones a little bit quicker. So in terms of retail, hospitality, foods, each of these are their own sectors. What we did was we clustered all these together because there's a lot of similarities and interrelationships between retail, hospitality, and food. In very fine print underneath the heading is a little more detail on, well, what does that mean? And you probably can't read it on your device, but retail, hospitality, and food, that includes things like wholesale trade, merchant wholesalers, electronic, wholesale electronics, retail, hunting, fishing, accommodation, arts, entertainment, recreation, food services, and there's a few more. So just try to define when we say retail, hospitality, food, we kind of further define what that is. Looking at the left-hand slide, what we find is that when you look at the total number of jobs that this cluster makes up in our region, it's a total of 28,605 jobs. That's filled and unfilled. Mm-hmm. And then that is, when you cluster this is the single largest cluster that we've got of jobs in our region. Below that, you can see that it makes up 21.9% of our local economy, so over a fifth. And this kind of as a point of comparison, you can see how that compares to the Kentucky average and the U.S. average. So we're slightly above the state and national average in terms of how much of a percentage it makes up of our economy. And then below that, you can see 3-year percent change in average annual wages per worker at a positive 8.9%. And again, I have points of comparison there. How does that compare to the Kentucky average and the U.S. average? Kind of moving to the top middle, number of jobs advertised in the 30-day period. So there were 2,282 jobs advertised for the retail, hospitality, and food sector. So just this cluster alone made up 31% of all jobs advertised. Almost 1/3 of all jobs advertised were coming out of retail, hospitality, and food. Kind of staying on the top. So who were the top 5 companies posting jobs in the last 30 days? And I'll just kind of read through them if you can't see them. So that number, the top job poster was Dollar General with 86 job advertisements, then Aramark with 65, followed by Lowe's with 60, also 65, Checkers Rallies at 39, and McDonald's at 39. And then kind of bottom center, what were the top 5 advertised jobs? This is kind of specific jobs. What were they in this cluster? So number 1 was retail salesperson, and there were 512 jobs advertised for retail salespersons. What you can see in the box off to the right of that is what we provide is, so what is the local average annual wage for a retail salesperson? And then as points of comparison, we provide some data on, okay, how does that compare to what a retail salesperson makes in the state? And then as another point of comparison, what does a retail salesperson make in Northern Tennessee? And I want to take a moment to define what we mean by Northern Tennessee. When we pulled data, the data we had access to from Northern Tennessee included 5 counties in Northern Tennessee. And I've got a little picture there of what those 5 counties were. What's significant is that those counties do not include Nashville-Davidson County, which would obviously probably have a much higher wage rate across all sectors. We don't have access to that, but we do have access to those 5 counties that kind of wrap around to the northeast of Nashville. So some of them are a bit rural, but some of them also are close enough in proximity to Nashville that maybe there are some higher paying jobs. So anyway, throughout the remainder of this analysis, you have on any one of these jobs, you have points of comparison. What are we doing locally? How does it compare to the state of Kentucky? And then how might it compare to Northern Tennessee? And the reason we did the Northern Tennessee data pull with what we could get was just because we know, because several of our counties sit on the border with Tennessee, that there is some traffic. There's people that live here and work in Tennessee, or live in Tennessee and work here. And we just want to show how some of these jobs might be affecting us in terms of wage rates. So to get back to kind of the bottom center, number 1 was retail salesperson. Behind that was first line supervisor of retail sales workers, 300 job postings. Third down the list was first line supervisors of food preparation and serving workers, 246 job postings. Fast food and counter workers, 230 job postings. And then finally janitors and cleaners, 137. So this is just the top 5. The list would, be behind this. There's going to be a lot more job advertisements for specific positions beyond this. This is just kind of a top 5 on which companies are posting jobs and a top 5 on what positions were in the highest demand. In terms of analysis, I've already mentioned 31% of all job advertisements. The thing that I think that is true about retail hospitality food is that in terms of education requirements, in terms of credential requirements, there's not many. So, and typically what you find is that any job that doesn't have a credential or education or skill requirement typically is going to be on the lower end of the wage range. That's really not a surprise. Of the 2,282 jobs posted, 750 or 1/3 were for part-time positions. And then the last piece of analysis that I alluded to a minute ago, this cluster has seen fairly strong wage growth over the past 3 years, and that's likely a function of some of these other industry sectors and clusters which have higher wages are putting pressure on retail hospitality and food to up the level of pay in order to compete in the marketplace and get the kind of workers they need. So I know I spent quite a bit of time on this one particular slide, but I just wanted to use it as an opportunity to kind of orient everybody to how to look at these slides. I'll try not to be as long-winded on subsequent slides, but just so you can understand how kind of the method to the madness on what we're presenting. Leslie, anything I should clarify?
Well, honestly, I don't have a question so much as I have an observation. This, and I know you have compiled 3 different sectors into a cluster, just because there's some overlap and in the type is very similar. But my big takeaway is if somebody on the street asked me what our number 1 industry was, who is looking for the most employees, I would have said manufacturing without blinking an eye. But what this shows is that in actuality, it really is this cluster. Am I reading that right?
You are. That's exactly right. Obviously, 7,442 open or jobs advertised is a big number. Mm-hmm. And when 1/3 of that number is coming out of retail, hospitality, and food, I think that's telling, right? That's, sure. It is a big, just our proximity to Interstate 65 and all the tourism and all the activities we've got between Franklin and all the way up to Mammoth Cave and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of restaurants and hotels and tourist attractions, and so this is a really big cluster when you think about it, and a big driver of our economy.
Okay, very good. So are we ready for the next one?
Yeah, and I think you're mentioning manufacturing is a good segue to the next one.
All right, so let's look at manufacturing.
All right, so manufacturing really, this one is not necessarily a cluster. This is a single industry sector, and as such, as a single industry sector, this is actually the largest sector. So you can see we have over 26,200 manufacturing jobs in our local economy. That's filled and unfilled. And you can kind of see below that, it makes up almost 20% or 1/5 of our local economy. So manufacturing is really big for us here in South Central Kentucky. And just a good point of comparison there, in Kentucky, manufacturing makes up 12.6% of the economy, and the U.S. average is 8.2%. So you can see that, you compare South Central Kentucky at 19.9% of the economy to the U.S. average, we're over 11% higher than the U.S. average. So we got a lot of eggs in the manufacturing basket, if you will. There is some 3-year percent change in average annual wage data there, which, at 5.2%, which is actually slightly better than what we've seen in Kentucky and U.S. averages. I think what I found interesting when I looked at manufacturing, because it is such a big driver of our economy, when we actually look at the total number of jobs advertised, only 370. That's only 5% of the jobs advertised over the last 30 days were for positions in manufacturing. So I thought that was kind of, to me, that struck me as low. It's such a driver of our economy, but only 5% of the jobs advertised. So that seems to signal that manufacturing is doing pretty well in terms of getting the folks that they need, seemingly. Who are the top 5 companies posting jobs? You can see there, and I'll just kind of quickly read through them if you can't read it. But Dart Container Corporation, Luttrell Staffing Group, Tenneco, Resource Manufacturing, Toyota Automotive Parts. What were the top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days? At number 1, production workers. Next, first line supervisors of production workers, followed by inspectors, testers, sorters, samplers, and weighers at number 3. Number 4, printing press operators, and number 5, molding, core making, and casting machine setters, operators, and et cetera. You can see, again, there's wage data provided, kind of, local average wage data, and you can compare that to Kentucky average wage data and Northern Tennessee average wage data. In terms of analysis, I've already mentioned, that it is a large driver of our economy. It does exceed the U.S. average. I think, part of our analysis is that having so much manufacturing in our region does increase the labor market demand for folks that have mechanical skills and some STEM aptitudes. Modern manufacturing is very heavy in math and engineering. And so whether we're talking about, kids coming out of high school or out of college or adults, it's more and more important that in modern manufacturing that folks have strong mechanical skills and strong aptitude in science, technology, engineering, and math. And then I've already mentioned, 5% of all job postings and talked about average annual wage growth. So, any questions on manufacturing?
This one I got because my question about the last slide sort of applied to this slide. So I think I'm good.
All right. Well, we'll go to healthcare and social assistance next.
Okay.
Okay. What we have here in total number of healthcare and social assistance jobs in our 10-county region is nearly 16,500 filled and open jobs. This makes up this makes up 1/8 of our economy at 12.5%. You can see how that compares to the Kentucky and U.S. average, which is slightly behind the state and U.S. average. And then if you look bottom left, this is really probably the most surprising thing to me. When we looked at 3-year percent change in average annual wages, locally that was 1.1%. You compare that to the Kentucky average change of 5.1% and the U.S. average change of 7.3%. That's a fairly significant difference in wage growth between state and national average compared to what we've had. Ours has remained relatively flat in this cluster compared to what's going on in the state and what's going on nationally. And I found that to be a very surprising statistic. Moving to the middle, when we look at the total number of jobs advertised, 1,069 jobs advertised for this cluster. And that made up 14% of all the jobs advertised over the last 30 days. What were the top 5 companies posting jobs? And I'll just read through them for everybody's benefit. Home Instead Senior Care, followed by Commonwealth Health Corporation, followed by HCA. At number 4, Twin Lakes Regional Medical Center, which is actually out of Litchfield, which is actually not technically in our 10-county region. And then at number 5, Genesis Healthcare had the 5th most jobs advertised over the last 30 days. Top 5 advertised jobs last 30 days. So coming in at number 1 is registered nurse. And what you'll see on here is a little asterisk. We talked a little bit about this in the first segment. So, and I'll spend just a moment on this. So over the last 30 days, there were 281 jobs advertised for registered nurses. And the reason I put an asterisk there is because I went back and I looked at all 281 of those job postings. And out of that total 281, I found that 66 of those job postings were for traveling nurses. And they were with companies that weren't trying to fill nursing positions here. They were looking for a traveling nurse so they could fill positions in other parts of the country.
Right.
So were there 281 jobs advertised in the last 30 days for RNs? Yes. But 66 of those were actually not for jobs here. So that, if you subtract that out, it's probably it's more likely that the true number was 215 jobs needed or open or advertised here. So I think that it's just a good point to make, because not everything as it appears as it seems when you just look at an open job or advertised job. Kind of moving back to the bottom middle, after registered nurses, there was a large need for personal care aides, nursing assistants, licensed practical nurses, and then at number 5, medical assistants. And I've covered a lot of this analysis. So I'll just jump to the last analysis bullet. When we look at healthcare and social assistance as a whole, what we see is the highest level demand, the strongest demand, as at the entry level. This particular industry has lots of pathways for laddering into higher positions, and so as a workforce board and being in the workforce development space, it's really kind of imperative that we create that initial entry into healthcare and onto that pathway, because once somebody can get into it, then there's many pathways and opportunities to elevate oneself within the healthcare sector. So that's my analysis on healthcare and social assistance. Leslie, any questions?
Well, I mean, the question I have, I don't think you can answer. So I'm just wondering why we're at 1.1% wage increase as opposed to state and national. And I don't see you as having the answer to that. That's just sort of a
I don't have a good answer for that, and I don't have really a theory on that. I think it's a good question. If we could convene healthcare and social assistance professionals, maybe
Right.
convene that group. I'd like to dig into that, but I'm not really sure why that is. But it is interesting that it's so flat because there's obviously a large demand for for healthcare and social assistance workers in our workforce. So thank you for asking a question that I really can't answer.
Well, but at least I told you. At least I said up front, I don't think you can answer this.
Well, and at least, part of this process of doing this analysis as a whole is that now we know to go ask that question.
Yes.
I don't think we knew that before. So.
Right. Okay. All right. So are we ready for the next?
Yes, we are.
Area? All right. We are moving on to professional services.
Yes. So I think what I want to do with this one is professional services cluster is a fairly nebulous term. So let me define that. When we, what this cluster includes are the following professions or sectors: telecommunications, data processing, rental and leasing services, professional, scientific, and technical services, management of companies, administrative and support services. So it's a fairly broad range of professions and jobs that reside inside this cluster. When we look at it as a cluster, there are 12,331 total jobs in the region. This makes up 9.4% of our local economy. And when you look at change in average annual wages, really strong at over the last 3 years, wages have increased by 11.1%. And that number exceeds the state and national averages that you can see there right below it. Total number of jobs advertised over the last 30 days, 1,242. This accounted for 16.6% of all jobs advertised over the last 30 days. So there is strong demand in these professional services in this cluster. Who were the top 5 companies posting jobs? Well, number 1 was WKU, Western Kentucky University, followed by, and this is interesting, home job staffing. And I'll stop here. And so what is home job staffing? Well, I dove into this. This is one of these, I would call it a questionable companies where they are looking for people to work from home and, conduct marketing and retail surveys from home. So it's maybe I shouldn't say questionable, but it's just kind of one of these work from home deals. And so they had 48 total jobs advertised. And when you look at where they did it, they kind of spanned a lot of different zip codes across our 10 county region. So is it a real job? Maybe. It's hard to tell when you really kind of peel it back and look at it. At number 3, Staffigo Technical Services. This is an IT search firm. And again, they're looking for IT professionals capable of working remotely. And so they're not necessarily located here, but somebody could obviously reside here and do that work, but they might be working on behalf of somebody in some other part of the country. Number 4, JP Morgan Chase, and number 5 is 5 Star. Top 5 jobs advertised last 30 days. At number 1, far and away the most, customer service representatives, followed by food service managers, medical and health service managers, software developers, and then medical secretaries and admin assistants. So if you're asking yourself, hey, wait a minute, why am I seeing food service managers and medical and health service managers? Why aren't those in other clusters? That's because when, professional services clusters, this cluster includes management positions. So if there's a management position, whether it's in agriculture, food, healthcare, construction, it's actually going to pull into this data pool as opposed to those other industry clusters, just because it's a management type position. So just a quick analysis on this. I've mentioned the 16.6% of all jobs advertised. what you can largely say about this cluster, a lot of these jobs are white collar, and a lot of these jobs are actually very well suited for remote work. And you can kind of see that in some of the data that's been presented. And then I've mentioned the very strong average annual wage growth that we've experienced in this particular cluster. So Leslie, any questions on professional services?
So wage growth, if I'm remembering correctly, you calculate that over a 3-year period?
We did the data pool allows us to we can look at it at a 10-year period, 5-year period, 3.
Right.
I chose to look at a 3-year period percent change. And that's what we've done consistently with all of these.
Okay. Because
so
that's an impressive number. And again, it leads me to the question, I wonder why that we have that jump. And it could be an increase in remote jobs. It could be, I mean, again, I'm not trying to throw you a question that you can't answer, but I'm just more thinking out loud.
I think, that's a good question. I think what you can largely say about professional services are most of these jobs require higher levels of education or credentials or certifications. Mm-hmm. And I think, so I think as somebody gains those, there's definitely, wages are going to be largely pretty good across this cluster. And I think you see, because of our location between Louisville and Nashville, there is pressure locally to make sure that we have competitive wages in these skilled jobs like this, so that we're not losing people to higher level wages in more urban areas. So I think we're seeing some of that pressure and reflected in the percentage change.
All right, good deal. So now,
all right, two more. All right, construction. So fairly straightforward. We have almost 7,200 construction jobs in our 10-county region. Construction makes up 5.4% of our regional economy. And in terms of change in average annual wages over the last 3 years, positive 7.2%. And that was really kind of in lockstep with what we're seeing in the state and slightly behind what we're seeing nationally. Here's what's surprising to me, though. When you look at the number of jobs advertised over the last 30 days, only 116 were for the construction sector. That, as a percentage, that only made up 1.5% of all jobs advertised over the last 30 days. And so when I get to the analysis, I'll speak to that in a second, why we think that is. So who are the top 5 companies posting jobs over the last 30 days? At number 1, Commonwealth of Kentucky, then Trillion Staffing at number 2, Charles DeWeese Construction at number 3, Medix Group at number 4, and Scotty's Contracting at number 5. What were the top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days? At number 1, it was for construction laborers. Number 2, plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters. Number 3, first line supervisors of construction trades. Number 4, carpenters. And number 5, operating engineers and other construction equipment operators. So analysis. Again, I mentioned only 1.5% of all job postings, which really seems artificially low to me. Why might that be? Well, when you peel back the construction industry, a couple things jump out. One, the construction industry has the highest number of self-employed people in our economy. 26% of, 26% of the folks in construction are self-employed. And I think what we see here is that, a lot of these employers are very small. They might have 1 to 3 employees, right. And a lot of these, self-employed folks are not necessarily going to go on to Indeed or Monster or Career Builder and spend several $100s to advertise an open job. It's kind of expensive to do that.
Right.
And Dr. Boone had mentioned this in the first segment. That this data we pull is it's being scraped from what gets posted online. And so in construction, you just don't see a lot of construction jobs being posted online in general because it's expensive to post jobs online. And some of these guys that are running small crews, they might have one or two dedicated workers that they depend on, and then they might have one or two day laborers that they go pick up to mix paint or carry shingles up on top of a roof. So it just there's a bit of gap in the reporting when it comes to construction. I don't think we have a true sense of the job need because of what I've mentioned here in terms of self-employment and cost to advertise. We do know locally that residential construction has actually remained very steady through COVID. In fact, there's been some recent reporting in the news that we've actually had some record levels of residential construction over the summer. So it has not really missed a beat or slowed down through this COVID period. In conversations with the city of Bowling Green, commercial construction is down a little bit. It is slightly down at this time. But by and large, the construction industry as a whole is doing pretty well.
Okay.
All right, Leslie, hopefully I was clear as mud, hopefully.
No, I mean, and that one I'm good, because I think you saying that with most construction, construction folks having their own business, they're less likely to advertise on big platforms. And that's where JobsEQ is pulling from.
Correct.
So that makes sense to me. All right, we are in the home stretch.
We are. Bear with us.
Yes.
All right, our last big sector to analyze is transportation, distribution, and logistics. And when we look at this as a cluster, total number of jobs in the region is 4,248. It makes up 3.2% of our local economy, which surprised me. I thought it would be a little bit larger personally. That 3.2% is lower than the Kentucky and U.S. averages. When we look at change in average annual wages over the last 3 years, we've seen a plus 5.8% change, which is pretty good and is really kind of in lockstep with what we're seeing, the state average to be and the U.S. average to be. Total number of jobs advertised last 30 days, 1,199, almost 1,200. So who's been doing this job posting and who's been doing the advertising? And this is going to kind of refer back to our first segment and some of the conversation there. So at number 1 was Brown Trucking Company. At number 2 was a company called Waltz out of Evansville, Indiana, with 50 job advertisements. They are obviously not in our region. At number 3, Total Transport of Mississippi, which is out of Richland, Mississippi. They had 40 jobs advertised over the last 30 days. And I'll say I've done this type of analysis periodically over the last year, and it's not uncommon for Total Transport of Mississippi to have 70 or 80 jobs kind of spammed into our region. It just depends on what when you run a 30-day data pool, it could be 40, it could be 60, it could be 80. You never know with Total Transport of Mississippi. At number 4, Tractor Supply Company, and number 5, Amazon Workforce Staffing. They're actually out of Campbellsville, Kentucky. They're not in our region, but they run a lot of advertising in our region, particularly over in our eastern counties, Monroe, Metcalfe, Hart County. They advertise a lot of job postings into those zip codes. So what were the top 5 advertised jobs in the last 30 days? So at number 1, by far and away the most, with 516 advertised jobs, was heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers. And again, like RN, I have an asterisk here. When you look at all 516 of these job advertisements, about 75%, and I'm being conservative here, 75% or more are for over-the-road trucking positions, and they're being advertised by companies like Waltz, by Total Transport of Mississippi, They are looking for somebody with a CDL that can drive a truck. And so, it kind of goes back to that, in the first segment. Are they jobs that folks in our region could take, from a job seeker perspective? Absolutely. These are open jobs. If we look at it through the lens of economic development or workforce development, well, wait a minute, are these companies even here? Are these truly open jobs that are affecting and putting pressure on our region that we're having to fill? And you could argue that no, they're not. It's kind of artificially inflating. So if you do the math on that, out of the nearly 1,200 jobs advertised, 75% of those are actually by companies that are just spamming jobs into our region. The true number of heavy truck driver jobs in our region is probably closer to 300 as opposed to 1,200.
Right.
300 is still a large number, and we need to work on that, but it's not 1,200. So it's something to think about. It's something to ponder in terms of how many, what is the true number? After CDL, after heavy and tractor trailer truck driver, kind of 2 through 5 in terms of jobs needed were stockers and order fillers at number 2, laborers and freight and material movers at number 3, drivers/sale workers at number 4, and then light truck drivers at number 5. In terms of analysis, I think I've kind of hit on all this. As a cluster, transportation, distribution, logistics makes up 16% of all jobs advertised, which is, if you compare it to that, it only makes up 3.2% of our economy. There's a lot of advertising as a percentage compared to what the actual number of jobs in our region are. I've talked about, kind of the CDL and over-the-road trucker, how that's driving up the number quite a bit. So, Leslie, have I caused any confusion, or is there anything you need to clarify?
No, I mean, and I'll just tell you, the more with each slide, I'm understanding what you're saying more. So I'm not trying to back out of having questions. It's just, it's easier for me to understand what you're saying based on, I'm getting a good feel for, okay, so many of these are jobs technically outside the region. Could somebody take a job with one of these trucking companies? Yes, but really that is not an employer located in the region who needs a worker.
Yeah, I mean, we here in the workforce world, we kind of wring our hands over the 77,000 open jobs that
right
is kind of the big number that kind of the big shocking number that's out there. But again, this type of analysis, you go, okay, well, it forces you to ask some really good questions about this. Okay, are these truly jobs in a region or not? Should we count them or not? We leave them in there so we can have the discussion. But again, I think the nature of the business, the nature of the transportation business is that these, and this is true across the nation, all these companies need truck drivers. It is in demand, big time.
Right.
And so what do? They cast as wide a net as they can for truck drivers by running ads in every single zip code that they can. But that gives you that, and when they do that, it kind of makes it feel like, on the surface, it looks like we have 1,200 vacant truck driving jobs in our region, and that might not be true.
Right.
It's probably closer to 300.
And my thought is, as a board, we need to communicate that.
Sure.
We need to effectively communicate, okay, here's the big number, but here's a breakdown of what that number is, what's contained within that number, the specifics. And I think this is extremely valuable to job seekers, even more so to employers. You know, looking at what, you know, what the data is showing.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think, no, that's exactly right. And so, you know, we're almost done with this. We do have one more interesting slide to show you, but I think to kind of wrap up this industry cluster analysis, you know, we concentrated on 6 big ones. There's obviously a lot of other industries out there that we didn't touch on. And if you're watching this and you are from one of these other industries or sectors and you would like some analysis like this, we're a phone call away. I mean, this is part of the function. One of the functions of a workforce board is to provide wage data and labor market information data, and so we can do this on your behalf. It's part of what we do.
All right. So moving on to, you mentioned previously the MIT living wage calculator.
Yeah. So
this is different, so you may need to explain explain a little bit more with this one.
Yeah, this is really kind of a food for thought slide that we just wanted to give everybody. So MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has a what's called a living wage calculator. There's a if you look at Bowling Green there in blue, that's actually a hyperlink to that website. And what MIT is trying to do is they're trying to indicate what does it cost in a particular area, in this case Bowling Green, what is a living wage? You know, and MIT only did it for Bowling Green. This is very specific to Bowling Green. You know, they don't provide this type of data for you know, Russellville or Scottsville. It's all we could get for within our 10 county region was a Bowling Green snapshot. But so what this is showing you is what is the living wage rate. And so as you look across the top, and I know this might be hard for you to see, they determine how many adults are in the household and then how many children are in the household. So kind of to the left, it would be 1 adult, and then underneath that, you know, 0 children, 1 child, 2 child, 3 child. And then underneath that is a kind of a living wage number and an hourly rate that somebody would need to make. And living wage is defined on the bottom of the slide as the hourly rate that an individual in a household must earn to support his or herself and their family. So it goes through how many adults are in the household, and then how of the adults in the household, how many are working, and then, you know, and then based on how many adults are working and how many kids you've got, here's what each person would need to make in order to have a living sustainable wage. Now, what we did and on that bottom row is go back and look at all 7,442 jobs and analyzed it through this lens. So if you look at 1 adult, 1 child, right? And 1 adult, 1 child, living wage would be $23.14 an hour. And so then what we did is go, okay, well, of the 7,400 jobs that were advertised, how many of them had a median wage that was at or above $23.14 an hour? And the answer is that only 24% of the jobs advertised were at that level. Meaning that 76% of the jobs advertised were for jobs that had a median wage below $23.14 an hour. And so we just kind of go through and do that type of analysis for each one of these dollar figures. Again, this is a food for thought slide, and it's just meant to you know, kind of spark your interest or spark your thoughts on, okay, what do we know about our workforce? What are we paying our workforce? And you know, how does it compare to what a living calculator might say, right? So if your workforce, if you know that your workforce is comprised of a lot of single parents, you can kind of get an idea. Well, if you're a single parent, what does it take to make? You know, what is a living wage going to look like as a single parent? And you know, how does, as a company, how do my wages compare to what this living wage calculator is saying? Is the living wage calculator perfect and absolute? Probably not, but it's probably a ballpark, and it's probably, you know, I think it's a good tool to use to just think about and compare what you know about your workforce and what you're paying your workforce with what this calculator says. That's the only reason we're throwing it out there and offering it up to you to look at.
Okay, very good. And we made it to our last slide.
Yeah. So that really summarizes or that really concludes the analysis. And really, as I mentioned before, we can conduct analysis for other folks from other sectors. We're happy to do that. We're happy to answer any specific questions anybody watching this might have. You can see on here a little bit more about our organization as a board, who we are, what we do, and how to follow us, how to contact us. And so we are eager, willing, and ready to be contacted with any questions, comments, concerns, derogatory remarks that you might have about this report.
Well, and I think it's important that, the focus of the report is more analysis based, because to me, if I just hear, oh, here are numbers for what have you, my automatic go-to isn't, but what do those numbers mean? But how applicable is this in this sector or that sector? And I think in what the board has created here, it really gives you insight into, okay, here's what those numbers mean. Here's an inside look at this number. And this whole process has been extremely beneficial for me, because I'm looking at this in a whole new way. And I work for the board, and I'm just telling you, I appreciate all of the efforts, because if I see it as, wow, this is incredibly insightful, I can only imagine that other people in the region would echo that sentiment. And we will have the video on our website. We will have hard copies that interested folks can download, so they have the actual slides that they can print out. And I think it would be good too to include a link to that MIT calculator that you had, because it may be, I know you included it for Bowling Green, it may be interesting for someone to compare that to, say, Nashville or other places as well. So all of those things will be included. And this is something that we're looking at doing every single month. Am I right on that?
That's the plan. Okay. Yeah.
So this one, I think there's a lot of detail, and there'll be a lot of detail with every analysis, because it's hard to analyze something in 5 minutes. But I think this one is especially good for giving viewers an idea as to what we'll be looking at. In addition, as much as I'm able to, I will post this information on social media as well. And we have our ID at SCKYWDB. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn as well. So this is information we want to share. This is information we encourage you to review. And this is something that we feel it really is our duty to get this information out and go through what these numbers mean. So I appreciate your efforts tremendously. I think a lot of others will feel the same. And as you said, through our website, we do have a contact where if businesses are looking for specific data from, this source, that's something that we can provide them as well.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much for all your information. You go get a big glass of water because you've done a lot. You've done a lot of talking, but it's all been very good. It's all been very good. I appreciate it tremendously. And you're invited to download these documents. We will have those on our website, and also join us each month, because I think the further we go into, the pandemic, just the further we go getting more and more acclimated to this jobs EQ system and reporting, it's only going to get better. We're going to get more and more insight from this type of format. And I appreciate you taking the time to go through it in a conversational way, because honestly, I have a whole lot more understanding of everything because of that. So again, thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and be sure to join us next time. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. Thanks, everybody.